Hey everybody, welcome to today's PermanenteDocs Chat, and thank you all for joining. Today we'll be talking about cancer care here at Kaiser Permanente, as well as the upcoming KP Fighting Cancer Symposium on June 11th. So today I want to welcome our guest, Dr. Alex Mentor. He's an oncologist from the Colorado Permanente Medical Group. So thank you so much, Dr. Mentor, for joining us. We're going to jump right in. If you guys have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you're watching this on Facebook Live, feel free to drop them in the comments section, and we'll jump right in here. We'll keep this fast-paced and high yield for all of you too. So, Dr. Mentor, thank you so much for joining us. Start by telling us who you are and what you do.
Right. So I'm a medical oncologist, first and foremost, and I've been with Kaiser in Colorado since about 2006. And started leading our oncology clinical trials program in around 2008. And in addition to that, I'm currently the regional specialty chief for hematology and oncology and the medical director of our Excellence in Cancer Care Council here. So I wear a few different hats, but a lot of my passion goes into the clinical trials work.
Great, wonderful, wonderful. Well, cancer is a scary term for most people, including physicians. As a primary care doctor and family medicine physician, I've definitely diagnosed cancer in some people, and then have a very hard conversation, and then send them off to my amazing folks over at oncology to treat them as well. Tell us about some of the resources and some of the services that KP can offer patients when they have a new diagnosis of cancer, when they're kind of going through treatment and battling cancer. What tools or resources do we have that we can offer patients to help deal with not only the physical but the psychological component of cancer care?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of different pieces that we're bringing together, and we're also working on sort of standardizing different parts of the practices between the different regions. But I guess I would start with one of the basics that we've had with Kaiser for a long time, which is our EMR integration, that if someone's got a new cancer, the specialist can automatically see, well, what was that scan? What was that biopsy? What's going on with this patient, and help to figure out what's going on with them and direct next steps. And that really starts with the EMR. I think most of the regions now have well-developed navigation programs, so that if you have a new breast cancer or new lung cancer, there is a navigator who can talk to you and say, hey, here's what we need to do next. Here's some basic information about your diagnosis. Here's some scans and some biopsies we need to do. Let's get this moving for you. And I think that's where, the handoff and the education begins for patients, even though it's really scary. In addition to that, we all do a lot of tumor boards where we get our surgeons together, our oncologists together, our radiation oncologists together, and we'll review these cases and we'll say, all right, in this particular patient, based on their other health problems and their particular cancer, what's the best, option for this person, and how can we move them through this process and get them the best care in a timely way? So I think the tumor boards are great. Another new thing that we've been working on the last few years with a lot of leadership from the Federation here is our oncology pathways. Mm-hmm. So we've worked on building sort of, if you have this cancer at this stage, we've reviewed the evidence, and these are the best contracts that we have, and this is the best treatment regimen we think that we have for your member. And cancer care is just getting so complicated. It really helps to have those experts weighing in on the most recent evidence and all these new drugs, and say, we think this is the best option for your members with this particular stage of cancer. And so it helps standardize our care and makes complex decision making with new drugs and new studies coming out all the time. It helps simplify things in the clinic. And we're now doing that same thing for genomic testing, because genomic testing is getting really complicated now. What tests do I need to order for this patient with melanoma or lung cancer or something else? And we have experts now weighing in on what's the appropriate test for that patient. Here's the easy way to order this so that you can get it quickly and order the right test so that there's less delays in care.
Yeah, those are all really fantastic points and services. And I think that's, you touched on the piece there about just kind of having one system where we all can work together, we can all collaborate even across different regions as well to kind of speed and expedite care and not having to repeat that CT scan that was done last week in the emergency room or in the hospital. And so that's such an important piece just to speed the diagnosis and speed the treatment process as well. As a primary care doctor, I was reading some literature recently about how primary care can be more involved in cancer treatment and cancer care throughout the process too. Often we know these patients for hopefully years ahead of time, and then they kind of go off to oncology, where a lot of times the oncologist deals with a lot of their medical problems as well during that cancer treatment, and then they kind of come back to us as well. And I was reading a study looking at sort of people who experience cancer survivorship end up sometimes doing better if their primary care doctor is involved throughout the whole process too, as opposed to just kind of coming and going between cancer treatments. Do you have any thoughts there about how primary care can support our patients and support our oncologists throughout the treatment process?
Yeah. I think it's complicated. I think, first of all, of course, we want to partner with primary care. And that the good news is that many of our patients are living longer, and many more patients are cured now these days than they might have been 10 or 20 years ago. And so we do need to keep our eye on the ball on the cholesterol and other screening tests that member may need. And the oncologists aren't great at that. Like we're there to do kind of what's going on with the breast cancer, what's going on with your colon cancer, what else do I need to do? But we're not focusing on some of those other general health issues. But in fact, for many of these members, those general health issues may have a kind of more salience for their long-term health and flourishing compared to making sure that we get that next cancer test done. So obviously getting that communication and making sure that primary care is involved in the follow-up for these members is important. I think it gets it's complicated when you're looking at people on, let's say they have an incurable cancer and they're on lots of complex cancer therapies and they're experiencing lots of side effects from the treatment, and and things are kind of changing. I think that's frankly a place where we've also had a lot of partnership from the supportive care teams and palliative care teams in the different regions, where the patients can get kind of a closer connection with that team for closer symptom management than the oncology teams can provide. I think it's hard. It's hard for everyone to keep up with the side effects of all these new medications that we're prescribing. And I think, it would be difficult to kind of throw that back on primary care and say, hey, this patient's not feeling well. Can you figure it out? We want to make sure that we're bringing our expertise to help manage those symptoms and side effects over time.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really valuable point. And I've had several patients who actually will email me and actually say, hey, here's what's going on with my pancreatic cancer. Here are the symptoms I'm having. And I have them seeing palliative care and oncology and radiation oncology. And that collaborative effort, I feel like, and really putting the patient at the center is something that I think is so beneficial and so valuable that I think we do really well at KP. But of course, I'm biased. So anyway, let's switch gears a little bit, talk more about some of the clinical trials and some of the work that you are most passionate about. So, for some people, when they think about cancer, they want like the best treatment, the gold standard. But in some respects, being on a clinical trial is the gold standard of some cancer treatment and really kind of the cutting edge. So how does Kaiser Permanente make clinical trials available to its members, and how do we decide if a patient meets a clinical trial criteria versus sort of standard care, so to speak?
Yeah, so most of the regions have a clinical trials program that's active. We have clinical trials that we offer from pharmaceutical companies, and these are frequently new drugs or new combinations that maybe they're looking for a new FDA approval or something like that in a new disease state. And then we also do a lot of National Cancer Institute sponsored trials. And we try and open a variety of these trials. I'd say currently the regions sort of decide which trials work best for them based on their size and the cancers they're seeing and what their capabilities are. We're certainly exploring, are there opportunities where we can do more collaboratively nationally for some of these clinical trials. In terms of when do we decide, like how do we decide which trials to open? I think it's, there's always, we want to look at those trials and say, is this a trial that I would be willing to put a family member on? Is the control arm on this trial one that I think meets the needs of my patients in clinic? And is this, new treatment arm that is the experimental arm? Is this one that I think, holds enough promise that it's worthwhile to, to talk to the patient and to, sell them on the benefits of participating in a trial. A lot of the trials we're doing are phase 3 trials. So you have to go into it saying, I'll be happy if my patient is on either one of these. Of course, we hope that the experimental arm is better over time, but we do trials because we don't know what the outcome is going to be ahead of time. So it's important to have that equipoise ahead of time as we're looking at the trials and then talking to our members about them.
Yeah, that's really makes sense. And always engaging the patient in that decision-making process. I know some people don't want to be on quote unquote experimental medicines, but also at the same time, if they're phase 3 trials and there's already showing at least as good, if not better than sort of standard treatment, then obviously that's something that I would want for my patients, quite frankly. But it's good that we obviously put the patient at the center of the plan.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that I tell my patients too is that one of the main reasons I think to participate in trials is you're sort of giving back to society in the sense that we're improving the science and knowledge base that is in helping the next patient with pancreatic cancer or the next patient with breast cancer. We keep getting better with our care and our outcomes because people participated in trials, and it took some bravery on the part of those patients to participate. And in some ways, like you're asking them to sort of, take a leap and participate in that trial, but you're helping future generations of people who are facing those same difficult decisions. They'll be able to make better decisions and have better outcomes in the future because of these trials. I think you have to be careful when you're selling it as you might get this experimental treatment and we hope it's better, because especially with the randomized phase 3 trials, they may not. And you have to assure them that, nope, this is the same care we would be giving you whether you were on the trial or not.
Yeah. Do you have any sense of how many patients, maybe does your patients or within your region are on clinical trials versus standard care?
I mean, nationally, the numbers for adult oncology are pretty abysmal. I believe it's somewhere in like the 5% range of adults go on clinical trials. That's been sort of a sore thumb that's been sticking out for a long time that people have been trying to figure out. I think part of the problem is that the NCI needs probably larger budgets to open more clinical trials. I am also of the belief that we should be doing more trials that are kind of easier to run, because clinical trials are getting really complex, and you have to be careful about how much work you're committing to with each clinical trial based on your staffing and the costs and everything else. So we need more clinical trials that fit more people in the real world and in the clinic. And then hopefully we can get that number up higher and get more answers faster for the public.
Yeah, I always talk about, when at least with my patients in primary care, I talk about sort of the research and sort of the data, and then I talk about applying that to real life. And sometimes those studies and those research it doesn't always apply to real life, and you have to sort of put it within the context of the individual patient as well too. So I can imagine you take a very complicated trial which has gone through multiple different studies and try and apply it to individual patients. That gets very complicated very fast, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there's long been known that a lot of the patients that end up on clinical trials are generally younger and healthier compared to the patients that we're seeing in clinic. And you always have to ask, well, is this result that we saw in this clinical trial going to apply to my patients? And that also kind of fits in with, well, we should make sure that the trials that we're running are as much as possible applicable to the general public, and not just sort of healthier, younger people that can jump through the hoops to go on to that complex trial.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of room for improvement there within our organization and within the United States and the cancer care delivery organizations in general.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of the most promising trials that you're working on right now, or some of the most promising trials that KP is working on as an organization that you are most excited about?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd say the biggest area that is sort of exploding in knowledge and improving outcomes in cancer care right now is probably immune therapy, which was like we didn't really talk about much 10 years ago, and now we have all these drugs, and they're for many patients they are wonderful game changers. But it's still, unfortunately, for even within the cancers where they're approved and they have good activity, we don't always know exactly how to use the drugs or how long to keep a patient on them, or how, why are some people responding and other people not. So answering all those questions takes patience and time and careful trial design. And I'll just mention one trial, I believe, that's open in a number of the different regions called the Insignia trial, which is looking at lung cancer, newly diagnosed stage 4 lung cancer. And, what are the pros and cons of giving immune therapy by itself compared to giving it along with chemotherapy? And if if your tumor has grown after being on immune therapy, is it helpful to continue that drug, or should you stop it, when you move on to a second line? These are all sort of very practical questions that we don't have the answers to right now. And we can put patients on a trial where I'd be happy with my patients going on to any of the 3 arms of this study. And it's going to answer some important questions over the long term that will help us manage patients better. And by the way, the nice side benefit of the study is that the study is providing the immunotherapy for us. And, these are incredibly expensive drugs. So for our patients, that can mean less out-of-pocket copays. And for the organization, that can be some significant cost savings, in addition to, contributing to the science, which is moving the field forward and improving outcomes over time.
Yeah. Sometimes we answer one clinical question and it results in 3 or 4 additional questions we hadn't thought of initially, right? So
right. Always.
The practice of medicine versus the science, as much as we like to, we follow the evidence and like to be evidence-based in everything we do, but sometimes it's a journey versus a destination, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a great conversation. We have a few more minutes here. So tell us more about how can we as physicians and healthcare workers, how can we help support each other and help support patients in clinical decisions in decisions to join clinical trials as well? For example, obviously as a primary care physician, I will obviously tell a patient, hey, I think you have cancer, or you do have cancer, I'm going to get you to one of my oncologists. How can we maybe set the oncologist up for success, or help the patient kind of understand that, hey, if you're offered a clinical trial, this may be something beneficial? So how, again, that kind of collaborative team approach, what can other physicians do to help support these clinical trials and this research we do?
Yeah, I mean, it helps all along the chain to have everyone sort of supporting the endeavor, because there are a lot of people out there who understandably have kind of, as you mentioned, concerns about participating in something that's quote unquote experimental. And I think sort of reassuring people that, these are trials that your leaders and oncologists and other people who are involved, we wouldn't have opened the trial if we weren't willing to put family members on it, and if we weren't hopeful that it was going to lead to better outcomes and better knowledge and better strategies over time. And then in addition to that, just, improving our, having more trials that are open, that fit more disease states, and give more options to patients as they're moving through their journey, I think is important as sort of an aspirational goal for the organization. And then sort of what are the technological ways that we can make it easy for people to find those trials and reference them, and make sure that we're kind of introducing them to the patient at the right time, and that we can get as much of that sort of pre-work done as possible, so that it's not creating delays in care to put patients on trials. We want to make sure that it's as seamless as possible, that if they go on this trial, it doesn't mean that they're going to have an unnecessary delay in the care that they need.
Great. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you for sharing that. I want to give you a moment here to talk about the KP Fighting Cancer Symposium, which is coming up on June 11th, of which you're speaking at. Can you tell us a little bit about that symposium and kind of what the goal is, and maybe give us a plug there to help get more people interested?
Yeah, I think it's for our members that have been touched by cancer in some way, and want to know more about what KP is doing to improve outcomes and to facilitate their cancer journey and to promote their health. And so there's talks on nutrition, there's talks about screening, there's talks, I'll be talking about clinical trials. And we did different topics last year, and we'll be kind of probably evolving things over time. But it's designed for people for sort of general information about, what does my cancer journey look like when I'm at Kaiser, and what are the things that I can do to help promote my own health as I move through this with my team. It's just informational for members who have been touched in some way by cancer or concerned about cancer that are our members.
Wonderful. Awesome. Practicing sports medicine, I'm a big believer in exercise, and there's amazing research coming out about exercise as a prevention and also a treatment and augmentation during cancer care as well. But we'll save that for another topic. Great. Last question here. This has been phenomenal. We could go on all day, but my last question for you: tell us what makes you most proud to be a Permanente physician.
I'm sure this is true everywhere. I just love my colleagues that are drawn to work here. I mean, there are people who came here and they want to take good care of patients, and that's their focus. When everyone is kind of oriented towards that goal of giving the best care and sort of cutting out am I building my academic reputation, or am I making the most money? Like, when you cut out some of that other nonsense, you're left with some really great doctors that are really focused on good patient care. And I think that's the team and collaborative approach that we have here is what really makes it rewarding to work here. Wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone on the Zoom and on Facebook for watching. So make sure you tune in, sign up June 11th for the KP Fighting Cancer Symposium, where our Dr. Mentor here will be speaking. And join us at our next Permanente Docs Chat, which will be Thursday, June 23rd at 12:30 Pacific, featuring Dr. Ali Tor, a radiologist from Southern California Permanente Medical Group, where we'll be discussing LGBTQ plus and transgender care, given that it's Pride Month here in June. So thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you all soon.